Okay, today's video is going to be about carbon and the molecular diversity of life, and it'll be chapter 3, section 1 and 2, and we're going to be talking about macromolecules. Okay, macro means large, and molecule means that it's composed of two or more elements. All of our macromolecules that we're going to be talking about today contain the element carbon. Okay, and whenever we talk about something containing carbon in science, we call it organic. Okay, so everything that we're going to talk about is an organic molecule because it has carbon in it. Okay, and so our big four macromolecules, number one are carbs or carbohydrates. Number two, lipids, but I'm going to put a little star by them because they're kind of macromolecules, but then they have a little bit of different behavior. Number three, we have proteins. And number four, we have nucleic acids. And when we eat food, this is why we're eating. We're eating to get these big macromolecules inside of us. So when they come in as long chains. And these chains are all made of different types of substances, but depending on what it is. Carbs have their own little beads. Lipids have their own little pieces and parts. Proteins have their own pieces and parts. And nucleic acids have their own pieces and parts. And not all foods are just one category. Some foods you eat can be multiple categories. But we're going to learn that the energy that we are looking for is in the bonds. Okay, so we eat to get the energy, and our energy is called ATP. And we will learn all about ATP and adenosine triphosphate. But the more bonds that a molecule has, the more energy it has. So if you're talking about money, this is your ATP. It is the energy currency of the body, and it's contained within the bonds. So more bonds equals more ATP. And lots of times in books, when they draw ATP, they draw it all sparkly like this to show you that it's full of energy. All right, so now carbon is our main molecule at the heart of macromolecules for organic compounds because he has that special ability to form 4 bonds. And because he can form 4 bonds, he can hold on to 4 different things at one time. So he's very structurally stable. And so he'll bond with a lot of different elements. He can form double bonds, and this is your CO2, carbon dioxide. And he's just going to be in the fuel, like when you turn on your propane tank. It's C3H8, so that's propane. Butane is another type of fuel that you use if you have like a butane torch. That is a C4H10. When you use any type of fuel that you put in your car, they're all composed of carbon and hydrogen only. So thankfully, we call these hydrocarbons. Now, you and I can't eat gasoline or propane to get energy, so we get it in a little bit different package. So sometimes it comes in as C6H12 with a little bit of O6 on the end. And so our fuel that we put in our body tends to come to us in the form of carbs, which are lovingly known as sugars. All right, so when things come into your body, they come in the form of a polymer. And the word poly means many. So our polymers, which are our carbs, our lipids, our nucleic acids, and our proteins, are huge, long chains. Okay, so those are our macromolecules. But they're all built of little pieces and parts. So the entire thing, on and on and on, thousands and thousands of those, the entire thing is called a polymer. But each separate bead on that string is called a monomer, because mono means one. So this is a monomer, and that's a monomer, and that's a monomer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you bond a bunch of monomers together, and you get a polymer. When you bond two of them together, and only two, nothing else, we call them dimers, because di means two, all right? So then in between each of the monomers is called a bond. We're going to learn about all the different bonds and which bonds are in carbs and which bonds are in which bonds are in proteins and nucleic acids. Now, when you build polymers, it's called synthesis. And your most familiar synthesis is photosynthesis. So basically, photosynthesis is when plants take water and CO2, and then they use light as their energy source, and from it, they synthesize and make for us our C6H12O6, which is our sugar, and then they make a little bit of waste product called oxygen. But they are building and synthesizing this big macromolecule, and this macromolecule happens to be a carb. Now, plants don't just make carbs. They can make proteins and they can make lipids, but we're just going to talk about photosynthesis, and you'll learn about other reactions later. But synthesis reactions are building. And in this chapter, we learn about something called a dehydration synthesis reaction. All right, so dehydration synthesis. Okay, so D means to remove, and hydro or hydration means water. So a dehydration synthesis reaction is a reaction where they are synthesizing and building things together, and every time a bond is formed, one water gets removed. So if I take this monomer and I take this monomer and I have a reaction that builds them together to make this dimer, what had to happen is when they formed their bond, a water molecule got removed. So minus one water molecule. All right, so dehydration synthesis. We dehydrate, synthesize, and water gets released. So if I have a polymer that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 monomers, he will have 5 bonds, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bonds. So there's always one less bond than there are monomers. That means he removed 5 water molecules. So in order to synthesize and build this monomer, 6 monomers together equals 5 bonds, so 5 water molecules were released. So if you had a polymer that was 973 monomers, how many bonds would that be? The number of bonds is always one less than the number of monomers. So the bond number would be 972. Then the next question is, how many water molecules were removed in the dehydration reaction? And what you should know is for every bond, there's one water molecule released. So that's going to be 972. Now, this process works in the other direction. So synthesize is to make, so we can also break bonds. And that's what your body's going to do when it gets that food inside of it. It's going to take that long, long chain. So it's going to start out as a long polymer. So when food enters your body, it's already in the polymer state. And then as you digest it, you're going to break the bonds. And for every bond, that you need to break, your body has to add a water molecule. So digestion is very dependent upon the water in your body in order to break stuff down. So this is called a hydrolysis reaction. Hydrolysis. Okay, hydro once again means water, and lysis means to break. Okay, so when you break it with water. So in this situation, we're going to have that same type of scenario. This one is a big long polymer. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 monomers long. Therefore, it's going to have 6 bonds. In order for your body to break it down, it's going to require 6 water molecules. Okay? So to make equals synthesize equals water removed for each bond. To break, so I'll go there, to make a polymer, and to break a polymer is hydrolysis, or to lyse it, to break it open, and then H2O added to break each bond. Okay, so adding and removing are going to be the same amount of water molecules. So if you don't have enough water, you cannot break them down. If you need to break down a lot of food, you just add a lot of water and it helps that whole process happen. All right, so that is your concept for hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis. The dehydration synthesis is also called a condensation reaction. And condensation is like when water appears on your glass kind of out of nowhere and it shows up. And so we call it a condensation reaction because water gets removed and it kind of shows up. So these literally mean the same thing. But hydrolysis reactions are breaking your polymer. So this one, you take A plus B plus C. You're going to get a ABC. Okay? You're going to build it all together. Hydrolysis reaction, you have it all together, but then your body's going to break it down into an A, a B, and a C. Now, this is going to release your ATP so that you can get that currency and use it to do work. And this one is going to require ATP. So it stores that energy. Okay, so this is storing energy for later. And this is spending energy. All right, so the poor plant takes this energy and is storing it for itself, but we take it and we eat it and break it down. When we eat animals, we take their stored energy in the form of fat and some proteins, and then we break it down and use it for our body. So that's the end of chapter 3, section 1 and 2, and the next video will be just about carbohydrates.